Hi, Ben with Novalex Stereophonic. I'm on location today at SkyFi Audio in Glen Rock, New Jersey. I work at the shop a couple of days per week currently doing audio repair work, and the owner's been gracious enough to allow me to use the shop space on occasion for some of my larger personal projects. So I'm out here today starting a brand new project. Let's see what I got. What we're looking at here is a pair of Altec 846B Valencia cabinets. So when I picked them up, they were fully loaded. They have the 416B-8 woofer, 611B horn, 806A compression driver, and the crossover is a N800-8K. As you can tell, these are in pretty rough condition, especially the tops. So we've got some water stains. These were magnets for people to put potted plants on back in the day. You know, a tall, smooth, big wood surface is just begging to have stuff set on it. So this happens a lot of times. So I've got some water stains here and also some bubbling. This is going to be the most challenging surface because we've got a lot of raised grain here from water damage. And we have to be careful because if I just start sanding on this, it could end up cutting through the veneer in certain areas and it's not going to look good. So I'm going to try to reconstitute this a little bit and get it flattened out before I start sanding. The other surfaces look pretty good, but I do have edge and corner damage, which I can take care of with some epoxy fills. I also might do some veneer patches in areas. But overall, these are completely salvageable. They look really nasty right now, but I'm telling you, once these are sanded and refinished, this walnut is really going to pop. So this is going to be a very cool looking pair of cabinets when they're finished. So in part one of the video, I'm just going to do all the cabinet prep and get these refinished. Once they're refinished, I'll load the drivers back in. I haven't decided what I'm going to do with the set yet, if they're going to be left completely stock or if I'm going to try some modifications and upgrades. It's kind of limitless what you can do with these Altecs. So part one is going to be the refinishing process. I have one of the speakers flipped down onto its side so that we can take a look at the bottom. I just wanted to point out I'm missing the original riser. So you can kind of see the outline of where it would have been and kind of where it was pulled off. It looks like it was maybe glued and nailed down originally and somebody decided to remove the riser for one reason or another at some point in the past. So I'm going to be trying to recreate that riser at some point to get the speakers elevated off the floor, and that kind of protects them in a way because the veneer edge comes right here, and if these are just sat on the ground and moved around just like this, eventually the veneer is going to catch and pop up, and that's probably what happened here on this corner. So that's a project for a different day, but I just wanted to bring it up that I will be trying to create a replacement riser for this set. I'm going to start with this section of damage here along this edge. This is on the same cabinet that has the really deep water stains and the kind of raised grain. Normally in this situation, I would just cut out this damage, get it flat, and then either do a veneer patch or an epoxy fill. But in this case, because the veneer is actually intact, I'm going to try to lift this with some moisture first, just to see if it works. And if it doesn't, I'll go back to one of my older techniques. So I'm going to start on this one that's less deep, and I'm just going to put down kind of a damp paper towel, and with the soldering iron, see if I can steam this out. I can't tell if it's helping. I don't think that's raising it all that much. I'm going to go again from this side. Where this method works really well is if there's just like a dent where something hard has come and smacked the surface. A lot of times you can pop it back with this method, but I think these gouges are just too deep for this method. So like I said, I'll probably just come in with a razor blade instead and cut that out. Or maybe on this one, because the veneer is intact, I can get underneath it with a razor blade from this angle and then fill it underneath to get it level again or flush. But if nothing else, this helps hydrate this walnut. Maybe it'll be a little bit more flexible when I get the blade underneath it. Just getting a little bit closer on this, it definitely helped with this one. And I think that is really going to allow me to get in there and correct this one and being able to keep that little piece of veneer intact. So I'm actually quite happy with the, even if I'm not able to solve the whole problem with that, just the ability to make it so that I can salvage that veneer and then end up with kind of just a squiggly crack at the end rather than having a dark epoxy fill or putting in like a square shaped patch or something. So we'll see how that comes out a little bit later. I think this is a good surface to do a test with the iron on and see what can happen. This is going to be a similar method to what I just showed with the edges and the soldering iron, but I'll be using a full-size iron. So I'm just going to take this damp cloth and try to go with the iron on top of it and see if I can get some steam injected into the veneer here. And because I'm going to be refinishing this and it still has the original finish on it, I'm kind of okay with putting the iron directly on the surface. If I scorch the wood a little bit, I don't think it's going to make that big of an issue. So my tentative plan is just to get this rehydrated and then maybe put a weight on it for a while. My theory is that I'll be reconstituting whatever adhesive is underneath this surface by heating it up. And if I can put a weight on it, rehydrate the wood, might just be able to get this down to flat. So let me just give this a feel. It's already helping. That helped with a lot of the kind of bubbling that was there. It kind of filled it back in. So those ridges that were kind of raised have disappeared. I'm a lot more comfortable sanding on that, but I can just feel with my hand that there's still a wobble in this, where in a high spot, like right here, I can just feel that it's high, and I don't want to cut through that with the sander. It's like a little ridge here. So I think I'm going to rehydrate the rest of this surface and then find something really heavy and flat and sit it on here for a few hours while I'm working on the other cabinet. So after kind of steaming this whole surface with the iron, it feels so much better than it did. I've really only got a rise at the veneer joint here. You can see how this is kind of like mirrored from the center here. And where those two pieces of veneer meet, that's where I have the little bit of a rise. And it's mostly here and here. And it's enough where I'm pretty comfortable sanding it right now. But what I'm going to do is get this really hot. And then I found this piece of like butcher block laying around the shop. I'm going to put that on and put a couple jugs of water on it. And hopefully that's heavy enough to kind of keep some weight on it. So that's what I'm going to try. I don't know if it's going to help, but any little bit that I can gain is just going to give me that extra safety margin when sanding. The second cabinet presents different challenges. So this one is very flat. There's maybe a slight rise again in the middle where the veneer joint is, but much flatter than the other one overall. But it has these little divots all over the place. So what I noticed in the other one, when I did that steam thing with the iron, there was this big like swirly scratch. And when I did that steam trick on it, it really helped lift that out. So I'm going to try that first here. But I think what's actually going on is the veneer has actually been gouged out. Let's take a closer look. So in these sections here, I can't tell if the veneer is intact here or if it's been kind of scooped and chipped out. So I'm going to try the steam trick on this first, and if there's no improvement, what I'll probably do is as I'm sanding, I'll make a slurry out of the walnut sawdust and glue and see if I can fill this in. And if that's not going to hold up, I'll have to do an epoxy fill and kind of plane it off. So let's see how this works. Yeah, I'm not seeing much of an improvement there. Let's try that with the soldering iron. Yeah, a whole lot of nothing. So that's going to have to be solved with a different technique. I'm going to give 150 grit sandpaper on the orbital sander a try, and we'll see what the surface looks like. So this is just the initial sanding here. And I think where I've got some of these dark spots, they're actual low spots in the wood where the finish is still in there. There's other spots where it's just in the grain, so I'm going to have to be careful not to go too deep there. And then I've got areas left like this where there's still a ring that I need to cut through, but the other big rings seem to have disappeared for the most part. And then I left some finish intact here on the edge so that I can use it as a judge. I like to do the edges by hand because a lot of times towards the edges the veneer will curve up. It's also easy to put extra pressure on when you get to the edge, and with the power tool I've sometimes cut through where I didn't want to. So I'm going to finish up these edges by hand, get this surface done, and we'll take another look once I've got the rest. Okay, so this is how it came out after getting all of the finish off of the top. And it's nice because you can kind of see everything. I've got some corners that I didn't know were damaged that I'll have to do a little repair on. Little tiny missing chip there. And what I ended up doing was just being very light and conscious of my touch with the sander on the edge because it was just taking too long by hand. So I'm pretty comfortable with it. This veneer is pretty thick and resilient. The one thing I have to deal with now that I've got the bulk of the finish off is this pattern that was left behind by the sander. So I went back over everything with 240 grit on the orbital sander, and I was able to clean up all those swirling marks by just going with a finer grit and going over everything again. And now I've got kind of a much better idea of how this is going to be in the end. And this ring, unfortunately, you can kind of see the outline of this ring. I'm not going to be able to get that out. I don't know if it's going to be disguised by the finish or more apparent once finished. There's also this ring here. And I think there were some raised points here, because everything looks safe except there's a spot here and here where everything around it looks good, but it looks like it's starting to cut through. So I'm wondering if those were raised a little bit. But anyways, that surface turned out really, really nice. It's not going to be perfect when it's done. I might even just leave this stuff alone instead of trying to fill these little marks. They'll just be dark spots when finished. I might just do that because I don't know how much better I'm going to be able to make those. But overall, what a transformation from how this was before. I think I'm going to take the weights off of this one and see how this ended up. So I removed the weights, and there's still a little bit of a wave in this thing, but I don't think I'm going to be able to get it any better than this. So we're going to go for the sanding and see what happens. So this is how the sanding turned out on the second cabinet, and you can see I'm going to have a problem with these dark spots here. So when we do the finish, it may help blend it in, but chances are there's always going to be dark spots there. So I'll have to make a decision of whether or not I try to do a new piece of veneer on the top of these or not. So we'll just do the rest of it and see how it turns out. Some time has passed since the last shot on these speakers. It's been quite hectic in here, so I didn't capture all the steps. But to bring you up to speed, I sanded down all the surfaces, I did epoxy fills on all the damaged edges, and then I did a single coat of Danish oil on everything. You can kind of see the nice dark finish of the sides. The sides came out really nice, but on the tops, on both cabinets, on this cabinet I've got the deep water stains that didn't come out here, and then on the other cabinet I had a lot of parts where the veneer was getting thin and it just didn't look right. There's also a lot of gouges in that cabinet. So what I opted to do was mask off the speaker. I did a rough sanding on here. I'm going to do a little bit more sanding before I apply a new veneer, but each one of these cabinets is going to get a brand new veneer top. So that's what I'm going to be working on now. Got some nice new veneer that's going to be going on these. I think this will look really nice. The grain pattern is very similar to what's on the side of the cabinets. So we'll start with just prepping this surface, and then we'll do some contact adhesive and get this veneer laid down. these are some of the examples of stuff that just didn't look good through the finish. So actually the other cabinet with the water stains turned out a little bit better. This is the one that I thought with this nice grain pattern was going to be fine, but this is where I struggled with the veneer. It was kind of raised up like this around this seam. So we've got things like this, and the finish just doesn't penetrate into that. So this is looks almost just like that, while everything around it is really dark. So that's the main reason that I'm going with redoing these tops. This is just some isopropyl alcohol, just to get any of the dust out. I want a good surface for the contact adhesive. Here are some of the areas that had gouges that I had filled, but this is all sanded nice and flat, so this will take the veneer really well. A little bit of this carries down in the side, and once I finish the veneer and do the first coat here, we'll take a look and see how this turned out. But overall, these side panels look really nice, and there's just going to be some minor blemishes that I'll have to touch up at the top. All right, let's get this veneer on. So what I'm ending up with here is the paper layer from the veneer did not get cut by the router bit. So I've just been flipping this up with my fingernail, and then once that is flipped up, I can just come in with the blade it'll take a couple passes to get it where I want it. But overall, I'm ending up with a pretty decent looking edge. Check these out. Tops came out great. Very happy with this new veneer. And look at how nice the sides are too. So this was just sanding and one single coat of Danish oil so far, and they look really good and they feel really, really nice as well. I'm hoping that the top takes the finish the same way that the sides do. I don't know if I'll get a perfect color match, but as long as it has the same sheen and looks nice, I think I'm going to be really happy with how these come out. About 48 hours has passed since I last looked at these cabinets. Tops are looking really nice. What you saw me doing in the previous shots was a light sanding on the raw veneer. I used some alcohol just to clean and prep the surface, and then we did one coat of Danish oil. The sides have two coats at this point. You can see the color is a little bit lighter on the top, but I think as I add additional coats, it'll darken up and hopefully I'll get the sheen to match. We have a little bit of reflective quality here. You can see kind of the reflection of my hand there. So I'm hoping that I can build up that sheen on the top as well. And then for final touches on the cabinets, this is the worst area here. This is where there was a big kind of gouge out of the corner. So on the top, obviously that was repaired and flattened out. Now the veneer sits on top of it, so that's all good. But on the sides here, I'm just going to try to do some color matching with a kit that I just purchased, so I'll show that as well. This is the worst side. I've got damage here. I already did a little bit of coloration on this fill. We've got the top corner here and then these three marks on the top. All the other sides look really good. And this is one of the reasons I opted not to re-veneer the sides, is because the overall condition was so good. I'll be able to touch up this one cabinet. And it's mostly just this one side, so that side can live up against a wall in the end, and they'll really present well. So that's what I'm up to now. We'll do the second coat and keep going. The second coat of Danish oil on the top of the cabinets has been curing for about 24 hours. The color is starting to look really nice and starting to build up a little bit of a sheen. I'm going to go ahead and buff down the cabinets and do another coat, and we'll see if we'll stop at 3 or if we'll keep going. I'm just about done with the cosmetic work on these Altec cabinets. From far back, they're starting to look really, really good. The color match on the top to the sides after the multiple coats of Danish oil, are really matching up pretty well. So I'm happy with how that turned out. I got 4 coats on the top at this point, 5 coats on the side. I'm probably going to buff it and do 1 more coat before I leave today and call it at that. It's really got to the level where I'm not going to get much more of a benefit. The big thing though is the tops were extremely dry. They've been sucking in oil up until this coat, and it's finally kind of built up to where I'm building on top of the finish itself, and it's not sucking into the wood anymore. I'm not an expert in veneer repair. I learn a little bit on every new project that I do, and I tried some new techniques in this project with forming corners with JB Quickwood. That turned out really well. I also tried a new product that I found on Amazon called the Coco Nix floor and furniture repair kit. And what's inside of here that I liked was these paints. They're wood colored paints that you can mix together. So between the mahogany, the walnut, and the black, I was able to do some color matching and stuff. I didn't use the putty in this kit, so I don't have any experience with that, but I did like these paints. They took the finish well. So in areas like this, after I did some color matching and little grain stripes, when I put the finish on top of it, it didn't smear or change the color of the paint. So I was really happy with that. I did encounter some other challenges with the veneer that I used. I had a little bit of roll up. This veneer was rolled with the paper on the outside and the veneer on the inside. So when it got laid down, it wanted to come up like this. And I don't know if I didn't apply enough adhesive on the edges or I didn't use enough weights, but I had a little bit of edge lifting where I could feel kind of a, I could feel getting under it when I would rub like this. So I ended up putting a kind of a glue bead down the sides of all of these and clamping a lot of the edges to get it to stay down nice and tight. So I'll have to do better with that next time. But I'm just about done with the cosmetic work on these. The last thing that I'll be doing in this part of the video is I'm going to paint the backs of the cabinets. So these, I don't know if this is original or not. A friend of mine said that usually this is like an exposed surface that's stained almost with the same wood stain. This looks like it might have been painted brown at one point, but you can see it's uneven, and I've got areas where I did corner repairs and stuff. So I'm going to just roll on a nice brown paint so that the backs look nice on these. And then I think we'll call it for this part of the video. I've got the brown paint applied to the back of both cabinets. It's looking really nice. It's amazing how much this little detail ties the project together. They look so much closer to completion now with those back panels done. I'm going to wrap up part 1 here. I'll do a follow-up video of part 2 where I install all of the components back into the cabinets. We'll test the crossover, build some custom grills, make some new risers for the bottom. So that will be coming soon. Thanks again to SkyFi Audio for allowing me to use their beautiful space to shoot this video content. If you're interested in this type of hi-fi equipment, SkyFi has an awesome YouTube channel that you can check out. If you're interested in purchasing this type of equipment, you can also visit their website, skyfiaudio.com. That's going to wrap it up for part 1. If you like this content, I'd invite you to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for part 2. We'll catch you on the next one.